Hey, it's Ben Wise from ZOAR Fitness, and this is the name game. Workout number 54 is chutes and ladders. For time with a 13-minute cap. 3 rounds of 12 overhead squats at 95 pounds for men, 65 pounds for women, and 8 chest to bar pull-ups. After those 3 rounds, you will immediately go into 3 rounds of 16 dumbbell overhead squats at 50 pounds for males and 35 for females, and 16 chest to bar pull-ups. Let's get into standards. So for both overhead squats, you have to keep that implement over the crown of your head. So if at any point, any part of the dumbbell and or the barbell, not the plates themselves, but the actual bar, is coming down below any part of the crown of your head to the top of your head, that's a no rep. So basically, this isn't probably gonna be as much of an issue for the barbell, but for the dumbbell overhead squat, this is a new movement for a lot of you, or something that you have not done frequently or haven't done much in workouts. Yeah, that's the big one where, if you're getting a really crappy overhead position because you can't get this elbow basically all the way against your ear in a nice pretty overhead position, you're gonna start to bend that elbow. As you get tired, it can start to bend. Make sure it stays above the crown of your head. And then for both of them, the depth is the other thing that's gonna be crucial, right? Making sure your hip crease gets below the top of your knee. This is especially challenging when you're trying to keep an upright torso and your heels are coming up. Anytime your heels are coming up, that pushes your knees really far forward, and a knee forward squat is actually not conducive at all for getting your hip crease below your knee. Basically, it shifts it. If this is my hip, this is my shin, right? My femur and my tibia, I guess would be more accurate, right? The more I shift forward here, even if I don't necessarily change the angle of my knee, because I'm still that deep in my squat, what it does is it actually raises my hip relative to my knee. So this is my knee, the top of my knee, this is my hip crease. It raises it if I push my knees really far forward. So if I'm coming up onto my toes to try to maintain this overhead position and I'm pushing this forward, this makes it way more challenging for things like pistols and things like a single arm overhead squat, to keep this hip crease below this knee, right? So basically, the solution here, try to create a lot of separation between your feet where you can, through your hips, basically spread your knees apart, try to sit your feet down between your hips rather than thinking about really tracking knees really far forward, right? So try to use a little bit more hip mobility, try to use a little bit less ankle mobility. If you can do that, it will allow you to, while staying upright, continue to actually meet that depth standard. So that's for the overhead squats. For the chest to bar, so you have to go from a dead hang, make sure your elbows are straight, to chest touching the bar. So chest being collarbones all the way down to the bottom of your sternum, right? So anywhere in this zone that you make contact with the bar is considered to be a good chest to bar rep. Setup, we're gonna put that 8-foot line down. So from your pull-up bar, tape that line directly underneath your bar. 8 feet from that, you're gonna tape another line, and your barbell and your dumbbell must stay across that line. Again, it doesn't matter, you're gonna be using your barbell and your dumbbell at a different time in the workout, so it doesn't matter where they're at relative to each other, but gymnastics, bar to your barbell and your dumbbell have to be 8 feet apart. All right, so strategy, 3 tips. Tip number 1 is to prep your overhead position. This is one that I can't stress enough. For a lot of people, the thing that's gonna slow them down the most in this workout is just the fact that their overhead position isn't good, so they can't cycle through reps quickly in these overhead squats. And that's gonna be true for the barbell, but it's gonna be especially true for that dumbbell overhead squat. Making sure that you can actually, like I said before, get that bicep along the ear, so that basically if you think of your arm as sort of like an upright, right? The more vertical it is in every direction, the easier it is to keep it upright. If you were to hold a sledgehammer by the handle and the head of it's up here, it's not that hard to hold if it's completely vertical. As soon as it starts to fall, it's gonna crank you out of position. It's the same thing with the overhead squat, especially the dumbbell overhead squat, because it's gonna pull you in both directions. With the barbell overhead squat, you can kind of use your hands against each other where you can create tension in different ways because they're fixed between one another. However, with the dumbbell overhead squat, you have to control it in every range of motion, both directions, right? Forward and backward and side to side. So it becomes even more important that you can stabilize and maintain that perfectly vertical in both directions arm, that humeral head, in your overhead squat for the dumbbell. So prep that overhead position. Things that are bringing your, again, your arm not just overhead, but directly overhead as well. So like this is great, like things that are like PVC dislocates are normally a great exercise for something like an overhead squat, and I'll probably still have them written in the warm-up. However, it's also really important that you do things that involve your arm being directly over your head. So like a cat, elevated cat pose where your fingers are interlocked. That's gonna, again, bring your arms closer to the midline of your body, basically over top of your head in this case. And yeah, that's kind of what you want to be prepping as well. So I'm gonna write out the warm-up, you can see it below, but that's gonna be something that's really crucial. Spend a lot of time prepping your overhead squat in both patterns. So I would say that goes for the day of, like before you actually do the workout, but also if you can spend some time the day before, or the night before, or the morning of, like when you wake up before you do this, spend a little bit of extra time mobilizing that overhead position, also your squat pattern. It's gonna pay off in terms of your efficiency in these movements. Tip number 2 is positional breathing. So both of these movements are overhead, and people might not think of a chest bar as being overhead, but your hands are on top of your head. So for a lot of people, especially if you don't have great overhead positioning, it's going to challenge your breathing by having your arms over your head for that long. So it's important that you think about actively breathing using the entirety of your respiratory muscles and not just like your traps, and thinking about breathing through your chest and your neck, but also breathing using your diaphragm, right? I think a lot of people kind of over cue that a lot of times they think only belly breathe, right? I don't think that's realistic in a workout like this. However, you also want to be able to use the entirety of your respiratory musculature. So basically think about, okay, get a big breath in through my entire, like, you know, if I was on an assault bike and really trying to breathe, think about how you're breathing in that, and then mimic that as you do your chest to bars and as you're in your overhead squat position. I think you can really focus on this when you're actively just holding that overhead locked position for the overhead squats. So I think that's a great case of you to be able to do this. And then tip number 3 is your overhead position and your grip. So in the overhead squat, you often have to kind of grip a little bit harder than you'd like, because otherwise your hands will start to slide out, right? So even as it doesn't seem like much because it's not a pulling movement, you still have to grip quite a bit. In the dumbbell overhead squat, I'm actually going to link to a video, I'll put it in the cards, I'll put it down below, and also put it on the end screen. But there's kind of ways that you can cheat how you're holding the dumbbell head, or where the heads of the dumbbell are going. You have to hold on to the handle the whole time. But yeah, there's basically ways that you can tweak with that and play with it. However, it often taxes your grip and puts your wrists in sort of a compromised position where it doesn't feel really great. But if you can maximize that position, great. However, it's also probably going to tax your grip a little bit more. And as we know, chest to bar pull-ups are something that's obviously going to tax your grip quite a bit. So it may not seem like it, right? Probably overhead's more of a limiter for a lot of people. However, grip limitations could come up, and I think it's another thing that could potentially limit you in this workout. So overall, these 3 tips are something that is much more, you can see it's concentrated towards position efficiency than it is what to do to maximize your capacity, because I think that's gonna not be the case for as many people in this workout. So if you're someone who's just watching this on YouTube, you can get a 7-day free trial of Pro if you go to zoarfitness.com/pro-trial. And for everybody else, best of luck on shoots and ladders.